So welcome back to another episode of Steve Talks About Night Vision Stuff. On this episode, we're going to talk about the most frequently asked question that we get, which is what is the difference between our three monocular offerings, the standard, the plus, and the pro. So let's get into it. So right off the bat, I will just say that every single one of these monoculars are going to use the same image intensifiers. They're all going to use Photonis Echo white phosphor tubes. So in terms of what's inside the monocular, they're all going to be the same. That being said, the lenses through which the light is gathered and projected back in your eye is going to affect the image somewhat, and we'll get into that. So the standard basically features everything that other PVS-14s have, which is adjustable diopter, adjustable focus, manual gain, takes regular AA batteries, takes regular J-arms. It's essentially an industry standard housing at a entry-level price point. We know that night vision costs a lot and actually requires a lot of supporting equipment. So this device was actually introduced to help those who want to get something good, but have some money left over for some of the other ancillary equipment. So we recommend this device for people who are going to be operating primarily in sort of rural areas. And the reason for that is because the optics on the standard have some rectilinear distortion. The lens does not have anti-reflective coatings, which means that if you're dealing with a lot of highlight sources and things like that, you're going to get a lot of what we call off-axis flaring, or just basically what you would think about as lens flares, which can be quite distracting. So if you're going to be doing a lot of urban work, or you're going to be dealing with a lot of like white lights and bright light sources, the standard may not be for you. So this is the standard in a normal urban environment with some overhead street lights. And you'll notice that there are some flare artifacts coming from the overhead lights. And the contrast is a little bit reduced from those overhead lights and the flaring. So same setup, now in a rural environment. You'll notice that the haze that you saw earlier from the overhead lights is obviously now gone. I think these lenses get a lot of bad press because people are blasting 1,000 lumen lights directly at it, and you get a lot of flare artifacts. But if your application is just rural use, general purpose, this is actually a fantastic option. So the Plus is going to address a lot of the shortcomings of the standard model by replacing the front lens with a lens made by a company called ADI in Taiwan, and they call this lens the Trident. Essentially what this lens does is it has a shorter frontal profile. It's made out of aluminum. It has anti-reflective coatings, as you can see. Corrects a lot of that rectilinear distortion. The anti-reflective coatings cut down a lot on that glare, so you actually get a lot more improved contrast. But beyond that, everything else is the same, right? So same optronics engineering housing and same eyepiece, Photonis Echo tubes. They're all going to be the same. So the only thing that's changed really is that front lens, and it's going to give you a bit more of a better optical performance. So this is a great option for those of you who are looking to spend a little bit more and basically get you, I would say, probably around 80 to 85% of the way towards the Pro in terms of performance. Now, there have been some reports of these lenses leaking or whatever. We have not really had issues with that, and if we did, we wouldn't send it out the door. I think the issue was basically the lens wasn't sealed right, but essentially what we do as part of building all these devices is we actually put it through a digital purge rig. If the device does not hold 7 psi of vacuum and 3 psi of pressure, we don't send it out. So what that means is if it doesn't hold pressure, usually it means just replacing the O-rings, which we will do, or we simply just send the lens or send the housings back. This is our Plus monocular in the same urban environment as before. You'll notice that sharpness and off-axis flare reduction is substantially better. You'll also notice the contrast is better because the flare suppression has cut down a lot of the haze. So this is the Plus monocular with Optronics rear and ADI Trident front. So you'll notice that the difference between this, the Plus, and the standard isn't going to be huge because you're not actually having to deal with the overhead lights and the bright light sources, etc. So the haze isn't really going to be there. You will notice, however, that the contrast is slightly improved over the standard. The darks are darker. So the last monocular is our Pro monocular. So this is basically appropriately named because it is a true professional grade monocular made by a company called Carson Industries. So for those of you who don't know, Carson Industries supplies PVS-14 parts such as lenses, housings, etc. to militaries, agencies worldwide. This is a true professional grade unit. Has obviously, the same familiar PVS-14 style controls as our Standard and Plus, but more importantly, the lenses are improved. The front lens features even better off-axis flare reduction. Rectilinear distortion-wise, it's absolutely perfect. Contrast is really good as well. And on the rear lens, you even get anti-reflective coatings on the rear, so it cuts down on any weird visual artifacts or things like that. This is our Pro monocular in the same urban environment as before. You'll notice that the contrast is improved over the Plus, and the off-axis flare suppression is also slightly improved. Even looking up at the overhead lights, there are little to no flaring artifacts. So this is the Pro monocular with US mil-spec lenses. First thing you'll probably notice is that it's going to be a little bit sharper edge to edge, and also the contrast is going to be a bit better, meaning the darks are darker and the lights are a little bit lighter. Again, you're not actually having to deal with overhead lights or bright light sources, so you don't really need the anti-flare reduction. So the difference isn't really going to be that big if you're primarily using this in a rural environment. So hopefully that was helpful and kind of give you a good overview of our 3 monocular offerings. The reason why we don't just offer the one is because everyone's use case, budget, etc., operating conditions, operating parameters are going to be a little bit different. There are going to be things that you're going to want to buy in addition to the monocular that will, affect which one you end up going with. If your budget allows, obviously get the Pro. But just know that, the Plus kind of gets it around 80% of the way there, and the Standard, I would say, basically gets you around 65 to 70% of the way there, depending on your operating conditions. So, the Standard is really good for people who are on a bit of a budget, operating in rural areas, static observation, things like that. Plus improves upon that, good for mixed lighting, good for people on a budget. The Pro allows you to operate in any conditions. It's extremely good at everything. If your budget allows for it, get that one. So hope that was helpful. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified when we post new videos, and we'll see you on the next one.